We have to create and nurture an intention on behalf of the community to support the Monumental 5.
It was peaceful inside, and everybody was just showing so much love in the event itself. Went to the door. One of my crew told me that there was an altercation outside, and I went outside after that to talk to the bouncers to see what happened. They said, and at that time, it was only about 2 police cars outside. Everything happened so fast that the next few incidences are like crazy. I remember another DJ, Mr. Walt, coming in and telling Pete, they have your wife outside on the floor. Immediately, Pete went for the exit, and the next thing I knew, it was Mace in the club, and we all started coughing. I was worried about Evil D because he has asthma. He was also DJing that night, and he pretty much was saving me because I was coughing from the mace or pepper spray or whatever it was that they chose to spray inside the club. At that point, I went to the door to see what was going on. I looked to the left of me, there are people being beat to the left. I look in front of me, there are people being beat in front of me. I look to the right, there are people being beat to the right.
That night, the cops did everything but protect us, sir. It's hard to describe, but the eyes that were out there can tell the truth without us having a doctor up any story. The wounds on Gabriel Diaz speak loudly. The charges that these 5 individuals are facing are real. I think about every night, what if I was hospitalized from that? Like, how would I handle it, you know? And I really don't know. Like, we say this happens a lot, but do we really know how to deal with this? You know, the best thing we can come up with that evening was to tell people to film what was going on. You know, and in certain states, I don't know if people know, but in certain states, it's illegal to film the cops. So we can see why it's illegal to film the cops. You know? And I say the cops have it out for hip hoppers, and I can't blame them because they don't understand us. And I wish that they can come and see how beautiful our community is. I wish they can come to the concerts and see that it's not about a bunch of gang banging and just doing nonsense. It's really about love and about us finding ourselves and being able to communicate with each other on a higher level. Through hip hop, through this little voice. True say it needs some, you know, it needs some refinement, but this is what our elders are here for. They keep us on point. But aside from that, what happened that evening on June 28th can never be taken away. And we have to make sure that we don't forget. We have to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And if it does happen again, when we show up, when we need to show up, we show up 10 times as many people that were here. So we can let the officers know, we can let Commissioner Kelly know that it was not appropriate for the police to use that type of force.
I never felt so threatened in my life. And I didn't understand why the cops, were so aggressive when walking out, telling myself, my daughter, to move the fuck off the block, excuse my language. And as we began to take maybe a step or two, I turned to my right, and I see Luis Pina being beaten down motionless. And before I could even say anything, he told me, move the fuck out the way, I'm sorry. And this cop pushed me. And what the push is not just a push, it was a chest and shoved me. My daughter jumped in the way and said, don't hit my mother. And we were taken and shoved from one side of the street to the other side of the street, thrown on the floor, and we landed on garbage bags in between parked car and the curb. I lost, in that moment, that moment, I lost my confidence. Something that I understand that happens quite often when you're attacked that way and you're assaulted that way by people that you think are supposed to serve and protect you. And I asked the cops, at that point we're on the floor, I'm holding my daughter. As I hold her, I have one hand up, and all I'm saying is, please stop. Please stop.
What happened on June 28th was beautiful. That turned ugly in the end. And, you know, I'm not going to take up too much time up here. I just believe that it took a lot for me not to, you know, jump on one of those cops that were on top of my family like that. But, you know, I'm a strong person, minded, and I knew what I was up against. So, you know, with that said, I just want to seek justice for my wife and kids, and, you know, just think positive and keep making the music that Pete Rock makes, because it's definitely not violent, you know what I mean? And some of these cops that buy the music and skip through it, you know, they look for that killer cop line, or, you know, selling drugs, or, you know, I'm dealing guns or whatever, but Pete Rock's music has never been about that, and I'm very positive about seeking justice. Thank y'all all for coming.
Unfortunately, there's a certain perspective that comes with the law enforcement when they're attempting to serve and protect. Because serving and protecting is about quotas. There's a such thing as called comp stat. There's a such thing as they have these precinct commanders and lieutenants. I don't know if you've been keeping up with the 8-3 or the 8-1 and all these precincts and how they're categorizing crimes and how it happens. It's a numbers game. There's federal money that comes from certain arrests. There's people upstate who couldn't dare imagine that crime goes down, because if crime goes down, they don't have a job. They can't send their kids to school. So when we make those decisions to prey upon each other, we gotta keep that in mind, that really, what are we doing? There's a prison complex. It's an industry. If you want apples, you go to an apple orchard. If you want to arrest, you go to black communities. September, I'm going there as if it's bear season. We'll see what happens. If it doesn't fall the way it's supposed to fall, we have what we call cross 190-50 notices, meaning they had their story to tell, we have footage, and the DA has footage that impacts the case. Let the jurors get it. And every time you talk about Manhattan as being this very smart place, but it's a bunch of sometimes educated dummies in Manhattan. Right. They don't go through their neighborhood and see us being harassed. I want you to mark how many times you see police arresting someone and stripping them down outside of their car. How many times are those people black and Hispanic? For a knife in the glove compartment, for a gun. There are 500,000 excess stop and frisk of black and Hispanic men. You go do the research of how many of those stop and frisk end up in arrests. Very few. So obviously there's a perception, and no one is concerned in the city and City Hall about quelling that perception or addressing the malfeasance that takes place. These judges don't either. So when people get arrested, I kind of have to give them a history lesson of what this is about. It's a system. It's been designed this way. And unfortunately, we have fallen right into it. In our own regard in a lot of situations. But this one wasn't that.
Now people say you must be exaggerating, and I'm saying, no, I'm not exaggerating. This stuff is real. It happens every single day. And as Brother Ken Montgomery said so eloquently, we're not excusing anyone in our community who actually are criminals. We're not excusing anyone who's been so inculcated with this thing called self-hatred, where we rob each other as black and Latino people. We're not excusing that. We're not excusing that at all. But what we are saying, that when something like this happens, when I heard about it, I said, wait a minute, at the Pete Rock party? Pete Rock is not only an icon in hip-hop history, he's right. One of the most important, April's right, one of the most important figures. I can't even think of one song that talks about anything negative. However, When we're talking about the history of police brutality and misconduct in our country, we also have to talk about something called racism. Systemic, historical, structural, institutionalized racism. If this was a fight right now, we'd have every channel in New York City right here. But here we are on a peaceful gathering, and there's barely any media here except for us being the media. And so, when I hear that it was a black cop that was acting out, or a Latino cop that was acting out, or a female cop that was acting out, on black and Latino people, I'm saying to myself, what a deep slave mentality this is. None of these 5 people have any criminal records. If this case is not dropped, Brother Montgomery, you know this, they will now have to go apply for jobs, and they have to say, I have a criminal record. And so it becomes what Malcolm X called a very vicious cycle.
The ACLU said in 2010 alone, the NYPD officers made over 500,000 stops. Okay, 2010 alone, over 500,000, 85% of which targeted people of color. The supposed reason for the stop and frisk were guns. In all of these cases, less than 0.2% of those stops resulted in a gun being found. Less than 0.2, all right? We know that blacks and Latinos represent over 90% of all citywide trespass arrests on NYCHA property, although we only make up 54% of the New York City population. All right? The presence of New York City, presence of police in New York City public school adds this dynamic as thousands of children of color are forced to learn under the threatening presence of the institution that will more than likely stop and frisk them later. So we have institutional issues that create this dynamic, and we want to be able to say that those are the things we have to begin to chop away at. So we're calling for a community response. We're saying that we will not continue to be victims of this, but we're going to go on the offensive. So the first thing we want everyone here to do is support not just the Monumental 5, but the other many victims of police brutality in their cases and their calls for justice. All right? The second thing, we want to make sure that everyone here marks on their calendar September 27th. That is the next date that the Monumental 5 will be in court. There should not be a day that these 5 people are in court alone. There should not be a day that they are in court alone. September 27th. If it was another album release party, we would remember it, right? It's a court date, let's remember it. All right? Last but not least, we want to begin to develop a culture of observation when it comes to the police. Far too often, we have this thing, well, I'm gonna mind my business when you see the police interacting with our community members. We do not have the luxury to take that position anymore. Lives are at stake. We have to develop a culture of observation. If you do not have a video camera, stand there and look. Because when you turn away, that gives them the green light to act a fool.
The men on your block, the women on your block need your support. I have personally seen cops go from cursing and trying to strip search people on the street to changing what they were saying once we hit the spotlight on them, once they saw that there were cameras. Community members love and need our support to be out there. So what we do is we go into communities and we offer cop watch trainings. We come out, we bring material, we give you guys t-shirts, we go out with you for the first couple of runs to get people to the point where they feel empowered to go out on their own. We do Know Your Rights workshops, where we will come out and do workshops that will teach everyone what their rights are for documented, undocumented, young people, and elderly. So the goal is to get as many cop watch groups started. What happens is that when we get a group together, we have a group that's established in the neighborhood that interrupts oppression when it's happening. So we're interrupting police oppression in the moment that we stand there with our cameras.